Good morning, Carolina. Welcome to the webinar for budget information for the new fiscal year. We have a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about how our budgets are going to be loaded for this coming fiscal year. We'll touch base on the automatic budget create process just to remind you what it does, and anyone who's new to let you guys know about it. We have some good to know information that you'll need for year end and some need to know information as well. So we'll touch base on those things. And then when we're finished, we're going to answer your questions about budgets, and we'll try to answer any other kind of year-end questions in general that you may have. My name is Nicole Shebeck, and I'm with Finance Business Analysis. I am joined in the room by Henry Price with Budget Planning and Analysis, formerly known as the Budget Office, right? I have Robin Burke here, who is also with Finance Business Analysis, and Deborah Beller with the Connect Carolina Change Management Team. Colette wasn't able to join us. Parking was not kind to her this morning. So Deborah's going to moderate the chat room for us. So just to let you know, if you're new to webinars, about how this works, you're going to use the chat window to type your questions. So we'll just type them as we go. You don't have to wait to type those. Type them as you think about it. And then we'll answer those questions all at once at the end of the webinar. We are recording today's webinar, and it'll be posted on CC Info in just a few days. Now, if you haven't been there already, CC Info does have a year-end web page. So when you're on CC Info, you'll click on the Finance menu, and then you'll click on 2016 Fiscal Year End. And that'll take you to all the information about fiscal year end. And this is the site that's updated as new information becomes available. There is a really, really handy checklist. This will probably look familiar to you guys because we used something very just like this last year, but it's been updated for this year. This gives you a list of the things that you need to do to prepare for the closing of the fiscal year. And it also tells you by when those things need to be done. Now you'll notice in the center column, the by when column there, that right now many things say TBD. But just as soon as we get the final notice from accounting services about all and disbursement services and all those central offices about those final dates and deadlines, this checklist will be updated. It'll be reposted to CC Info. But there are some things you can start doing and preparing for now. So go ahead and grab this checklist and start using it. But stay tuned for the dates when they come out for this to be updated with those dates. I saw lots of cubicles around campus last year with this pinned up beside the computer. So it's a really, really handy tool to use. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of our webinar today. We're going to talk about loading budgets. We want to let you guys know how your budgets are going to be loaded. For the majority of our funds, this process is going to be managed by the Budget Planning and Analysis Office, again, formerly known as the Budget Office. Let's talk about state child expense and state revenue. Now, just to remind you, state child expense might seem like a little bit of a foreign term. When we say state child expense, we're talking about your departmental state budgets, okay? So for your departmental state budgets and state revenue budgets, the permanent budget will be loaded in June. Last year it happened right around, I think, the 29th or the 30th of June, so it'll happen right there at the end of June. And they'll be sitting there ready for you to look at in all their glory on July 1st, okay? And so just, again, that permanent budget, what we're talking about is 2018 in this case. Your 2017 budgets are already in there. We're talking about the 2018 budget that will be loaded. Your carry-forward budgets will be loaded after the university receives approval from the Office of State Budget Management. So if OSBM is a new term to you, that means Office of State Budget Management. And again, once they make their approval of the carry-forward, then those budgets will be loaded, again, by Budget Planning and Analysis. So for F&A, we kind of have three pots of dollars. For your F&A departmental expense budgets, your child expense budgets, the permanent budget, and again, this is your FY18 dollars, that permanent budget will be loaded in June. just as with state budgets, somewhere right around the very end of June. Your carry forward budgets, no approval needed for those, okay? So we don't have to go outside of the university for that. But what we do have to do is wait for year-end close, so we know exactly how much to carry forward. So your carry forward budgets will be loaded in July, probably somewhere around maybe the second week or so of July, but after the official year-end close from the university. Now those budgets by and large are loaded to source 14101. That source is familiar to you. That's the source that you use for almost all of your F&A transactions. However, if you have negative budget balances in sources 14102, 14103, or 14104, those sources will be used to bring forward any negative budget balances that you have from FY16, okay? And just to remind you, 14102 and 14103 are payroll suspense sources, and 14104 is it's a non-personnel suspense source. By and large, it's used heavily for folks who have data collect batches going through InfoPort for their core services and recharge centers, okay? So those are the suspense sources for that. And then finally, your formula allocation budget, that will be loaded in July after year-end close. Again, have to make sure all the dollars have been processed for FY16, and after the year closes, the formula allocation will run and your budgets will be loaded for that as well. Now, for trust budgets, we have two different scenarios, all right? So the first is whether or not that budget is associated, and then something different happens if it is a non-associated trust expense budget. So let's talk about the difference between these. Let's start by talking about the associated budgets. So you will know that a source is associated if there is a budget period 2016 row on the associated budgets table. And I'm really specific about this budget period 2016 because there were sources that were associated in 2015, and folks decided that they didn't want them associated, and so they don't have a budget row for the current fiscal year. So what we're looking at are things that are that have current rows on the associated budgets table. All right, and I'm going to give you a screenshot of what that looks like in just a minute. Now, for those sources that do have that 2016 budget period row, we will load budgets to the chart field string that is indicated on that row. Okay, so this table is very important. It tells us, one, if we're going to load budget, and it tells us, two, where we're going to load the budget. So the budget that will be loaded is going to be based on your fiscal year-end fund balance. Not budget balance, your fiscal year-end fund balance. And that's going to be based on the fund and the source, okay? So owning department will not be part of the equation. Last year that was taken into account. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say you have $1,000 sitting in one fund source and department, and then you have another $1,000 sitting in the same fund and source but a different department. Okay, last year only $1,000 got loaded. This year we're going to load the full $2,000. Okay, so the entire fund balance based on fund and source will be loaded as the beginning budget. And again, that budget will be loaded to the chart field string on the associated budgets table. So here's how you get to the associated budgets table. When you are in Connect Carolina, follow the menu path as indicated across the top of the screen. You're going to go from the main menu to the finance menu to commitment control, define control budgets, associated budgets. And when you're on this screen, the ledger group that you'll select is trust_rev. If you don't remember that, it's okay. It's the only thing in the lookup. So you'll find it. And then once you select that, make sure you hit search. And that is going to take you to the associated budgets table. Now, just a little FYI, when you land there, it's actually going to land you on the revenue tab. Okay, so you want to click on the expenditure tab. That's where we are now. You want to make sure, again, that you have a row with a budget period of 2016. Okay, that lets us know that that is an actively associated source. Okay, and that we need to use that source. And the chart field string that is on that line is where your budget will post for FY17. Okay, so that fund balance will post as your beginning budget to the chart field string indicated on that line. Now notice, in this case, there's a program. Okay, so the beginning budget will go to this fund, source, account, department, and program. If there's no program, then there will be no budget in there, right? It would just be fund, source, account, department. It's going to post exactly as it looks on this screen, okay? Cost code 1 and cost code 3, they're there, but we don't use those for our budgeting anymore, so you don't need to worry about that, okay? They're there, but they're not applicable. All right, so let's talk about non-associated budgets, okay? So for those budgets that are non-associated, in other words, they do not appear with the 2016 budget period row on that table, there's no fund balance carry forward. That means that on 7/1, your beginning budget is 0, okay, because there's no fund balance carry forward, $0. So if you need a budget, you have to enter, the departments have to enter a budget via a budget journal, okay? Now, again, this is for any source that is not on the associated budgets table. So right off the bat, we know this applies to athletics, this applies to the student affairs sources, this applies to UNC faculty physicians, but it also applies to many, many other hundreds, probably even thousands of sources, okay? Lots and lots of sources are not associated, all right? So for those that are not, you will need to enter your own budgets. This is the same process that we followed last year, not any different at all than last year. Now, let's say you have a lot of budgets to load. You might have 50 or more budgets that you need to load. If you do, remember to use the budget import template, okay? And you can find that on the BPNA website, and here's the link at the bottom. You'll want to use the trust import template. They're different for each fund type, okay? So you want to grab the one for trust, and you can import all of them in one fell swoop. So it makes it a little bit easier. And there are instructions out there on how to do that in one of the budget manuals. All right, so let's talk about ABC, Automatic Budget Create. So just to remind you, Automatic Budget Create is a process that will update the trust expense budget based on any revenue that you receive. And you have to be a source listed in the associated budgets table to benefit from Automatic Budget Create. We don't have any changes to the ABC process for this coming year. It's going to work in July just as it's working now, and will work in June. Okay, so no changes there. But there are a couple of things we want to let you know about as far as timing with the Automatic Budget Create. So the last run of that process for this current fiscal year is going to be on June 30th. All right, it runs every single night, and it will run for the last time on June 30th. So what that means is that any revenue has to have come in by calendar day June 30th in order to have an expense budget created for FY16. So let me put it another way. You know, there's a lot of year-end work that happens after June 30th. And if somebody goes in and recognizes revenue on the second day of July and they give it a June 30th date, it won't matter because the allocation will have already run for the last time for fiscal year 16, okay? So again, we're just talking about budget, but just want to let you know that, all right? That's how that works. Now, ABC will resume after we have the official year-end close announcement from accounting services, okay? But the good news about ABC is it looks at your revenue on a year-to-date basis. So if you get in, you know, $10,000 between 7/1 and whatever day we have our official year-end close and run ABC, you'll get budget for that full amount because it looks year-to-date every time it runs, okay? So no worries. You're not going to lose out on any budget. It's just going to be delayed probably for a couple of weeks until year-end close. All right, I want to give you guys some good to know and some need to know information for year-end. So with the good to know, you may want to make some changes to the associated budgets table, okay? So there may be a source you want to add to the table, or maybe you've decided that you don't want a source associated. If that's the case, you need to submit a help ticket, okay? And that ticket must be submitted by close of business on May 20th. So that gives you about 2.5 weeks to get that in. If it is entered by the 20th, then we guarantee that we'll have it configured in the table and that it'll be there and be ready to go for the FY17 budgets, okay? Now, these tickets need to come from the MOU lead or someone else in the dean's office, because when we get those, we can't just willy-nilly make changes to the configuration. We have to actually go back and contact the MOU or the dean's offices to make sure that this is okay. So the tickets need to come from somebody in the dean's office. This is not unusual. This is the process that we follow all of the time for any updates to this table. When you enter the help ticket, you want to make sure you choose Connect Carolina as the department or service, Connect Carolina Finance as the first type of help needed, and Budget as the second type of help. That makes sure that it gets to the right place. If you choose something different, who knows where it might route to and get to, okay? So Connect Carolina Finance, and Budget. And remember, this is going to be posted online. So if you don't remember this, you'll go and look at the webinar, you'll grab the screenshot, and you'll fill it out. When you enter the help ticket, you want to be sure that you include the revenue and the expense chart field streams, because if you don't, the ticket's just going to be sent back to you because we won't know what to put in the table. So as you're deciding what the revenue and expense chart field streams look like, think about, when I receive revenue on this chart field stream, I want it to create budget on this chart field stream, okay? So that's what you need to think about, and this is where it'll be entered in the system, okay? So let's look at this one for a second. So this is saying when I receive revenue on 29,100 and source 01056 for department 284,000, I want budget to come over here on 29,100, same source, account 500,100, and department, okay? I don't want to use a program. So that's what this means. Now remember with program, that program doesn't mean, you know, it's not like a wild card. If I don't use program, then I'm saying, in this case, I'm saying when revenue comes in without a program, I want it to give me expense budget. If revenue comes in with a program, that's not what's on the table. That's not going to give me expense budget. So be really deliberate as you're thinking about how you're setting up these chart field streams. And if this sounds a little like Greek to you, there is an Associated Budgets webinar out there on CC Info that you can go and you can spend about 30 minutes watching, and it'll answer all the questions that you have about it, okay? But again, just be intentional as you're putting these chart field streams together. So another piece of good to know information for you. We are making a change to the chart field that determines whether or not a transaction writes to a ledger group, okay? And a ledger group, like, you know, is it going to update the budget? Yes or no? That's what we're saying. So our chart field is going to be changed from source to fund. So let me give you a screenshot, an example, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So in this case, I have a state fund, a state source. I'm paying an SPA personnel, and I've got a department in arts and sciences. Okay, so currently it's the source, 12,001, that tells that transaction, hey, you need to update their state and their state parent budgets. You need to reduce the budgets by the total of this transaction. It's the source that does that, okay? It's the source that says, hey, when I go and look at budgets overview, or when I'm looking at the ledger roll-up in InfoPort, I'm going to see this transaction on this, you know, on state or state parent. But next year, it's going to be the fund that makes that determination, okay? So it'll be 20101 that says, hey, this is a state transaction. This is a state parent transaction. Now, to almost everyone on this campus. I think quite literally the math works out to 99.9999% of campus. This is completely transparent. But student affairs, because of some of the things that they do with how they control, this is going to make a difference for them. So we're working with them independently to mitigate that impact and to help them prepare for the next fiscal year. But for the rest of you, I can't imagine you'll ever notice the difference. But we just want to let you know about it. Now, this is not budget related, but it's a change, and since we've got your attentive ears and eyes, we want to make sure you know about it. I want to tell you something about what's going to happen with PO roll for this coming year. So just to remind you, PO roll is the process of moving purchase orders with open encumbrances from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, okay? Now, this fiscal year, we're going to roll all POs with open encumbrances. Okay, that includes POs that have OSR funds and capital improvement funds. Now, last year we didn't do that. It was just state, F&A, and trust that rolled. And this year, if there's an open encumbrance, that mother is rolling, all right? Now, regardless of the project's end date, so doesn't matter that the project ends on 6/30, it's going to go ahead and get rolled into the next fiscal year. Doesn't mean you're going to get to spend on it, because that voucher will fail. Now, don't think you're getting away free. You're not. Because the voucher will fail. But we're going to go ahead and move that purchase order into the next fiscal year, okay? Now, remember, two things happen when a PO rolls, okay? The first thing is that the accounting date and the budget date change from whatever the current date is on the purchase order to 7/1 of the new fiscal year. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is that the balance of those open encumbrances moves from whatever the current fiscal year is into the next fiscal year. Now, remember, OSR and capital improvements, those are life to date. They don't really have a fiscal year. So you might have a purchase order that's sitting in 2014. So if you look at the example here on the screen, this little mock-up, the accounting date and budget date on this are from 11/25/14. That's FY15, okay? So that fiscal year is closed, but because it's life to date, that date is still okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to just roll it into next year. So now that accounting date and budget date changed to 7/1/16. Nothing else changed, right? Same line is still open. Balance is still the same. Look, so you can believe me. Whoop, wait a minute. Look, there you go. See? There, 11/25/14, 7/1/16. Everything else stays the same. We're just changing the date, okay? Picking it up and moving it into the next fiscal year, all right? Just want to mention that to you. Need to know. Everything else has been good to know. Now, this is something you need to know. Effective July 1st, we are going to reinstate control on state parents, okay? So here's what this means. This is only impacting non-personnel transactions. People are still going to get paid. Calm down out there. I hear what you're saying. Your professors and all their glory will still get their paychecks, okay? Everybody's still going to get paid. But for non-personnel transactions, let's say in this example on the screen, you're buying a laptop, okay? What this means is when you go to purchase that laptop, your school, your MOU, must have budget available in this chart field stream, all right? So with the fund, it's at the detail level. So that means there better be money sitting in academic affairs for instruction. That's what that 01 means. 201, academic affairs, state funds, 01, instruction, okay? The source, the account, the department, those all roll up. So it's saying, hey, in state appropriations for, supplies and material, purchase services, lots and lots of things roll up to $520,000 on state funds. And for the College of Arts and Sciences, there needs to be money sitting in this chart field stream for me to make my purchase, okay? Now, there can be money sitting in 20110, but that doesn't count, right? Because I have to have money at the detail fund level, all right, in instruction, all right? You guys have all been to the budgets class, and I probably taught you. And if not, the fabulous Chris Mentor did. So I'm sure you know all about this, but just want to remind you, okay? Now, I can hear you out there. I know what you're thinking, and we think it too. We are thinking about rolling fund up, okay? So it just being academic affairs. Doesn't matter whether it's for instruction or research or public service or, you know, you fill in the blank, right? Why can't we just make it academic affairs? We're testing that, all right? So it's under consideration, and we're trying right now. We've got that in our test environment, just making sure it doesn't break anything. You'd be amazed what seemingly innocuous changes you can make, and all of a sudden the system is spitting at you and there's sparks flying. I'm telling you, I've seen it. Okay. So just in closing, I want to make sure you remember a few things. Budget planning and analysis will load the budgets for state, F&A, and for trust with associated budgets. Okay? The last run of the automatic budget create process for this fiscal year is going to be on June 30th. Okay? The first run for next fiscal year will be after year-end close. If you want to make a change to a source, okay, to add a source to the a trust source to the associated budgets table or remove a trust source from the associated budgets table, you need to submit a help ticket. And that ticket needs to be submitted by May 20th to be guaranteed to be configured and ready to go for next fiscal year. I know that seems early, but there's just a lot of moving parts right now. So we know we can guarantee that it'll be done for you if we have it by that date. And then finally, the controls will be turned back on state parent effective July 1. All right. Just to remind you, this fiscal year-end page on CC Info has all the year-end information that your little heart could ever desire and is regularly being updated. So be sure to tune back in when we get that budget memo coming out from, does it come out from Controller or Accounting Services? I can't remember, but you know the one that comes out that has all the dates of when everything has to be done. Once that email comes out, that nice little checklist will be updated on CC Info. So you can go out, just stay tuned, people. All right, what questions do you have? Remember, type the questions that you have into the chat window, and we'll take those as we can, one by one. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water. Give us just a moment.
Okay, here's our first question. Oh, it already slipped past me. They're coming in. Will BBA for non-associated trusts roll forward?
No.
Well, that was simple.
Yep. It has to be associated. There is no carry forward, okay, if it's not associated. But let me be more specific. BBA, budget, balance, available. We're not rolling BBA. We're rolling fund balance. Okay, this is not your year-end budget. A budget can be a number based on all sorts of things. We're saying how much cash does this trust source actually have at the end of the year? That is the amount that will roll forward if it's associated. It's not budget balance available that's rolling. It's the fund balance. Okay. You have anything to say? Come on. Don't be bashful.
And just to add to that, if you do have a non-associated trust source fund and you want to establish that budget in the new year, just create a budget journal for that ending amount in the new fiscal year, and it'll populate for you.
Yep. Thank you, Henry.
All right, here's our next question. Is there a query with a list of source and source owners that are not on the 2016 associated table?
No, but you can easily go to the 2016 table and you can export it to Excel. So there's a download button there. Drop the whole thing in Excel, throw the filters on it, and you can filter by source, you can filter by department, you can filter by budget period.
Okay, next question. When setting up F&A carry forward and formula budgets, will you be posting to fund, source, department, and program? So carry forward, yes, it will be posted to program,
formula allocation will not be posted to program this year. It was last year, and overwhelmingly the feedback from campus was, why did you do that? So program has been removed, and it will post to fund, source, account, and department this year for formula allocation.
All right, next question. Did you say when the budget will post for associated trusts in the new fiscal year?
Yes, it will post after year-end close. So it'll be a couple of weeks. We'll have to wait for the official year-end close, and then we'll post those budgets.
All right, next question. Will you be adding a Rass, I assume that means reference, reference code for carry forward, permanent, and formula budgets to make them easy to identify these separately from all other budget transactions?
So there are several things that are being used. There will be what's called a journal ID mask on carry forward. So the first four letters of the carry forward journal ID will be FACF, F&A carry forward, FACF. That is what we're going to use right here. Yeah. There will be a reference and a description used. Here's the thing. It is very simple to see what is what when you're looking in PeopleSoft in the budgets overview. Right now, InfoPort is not pulling in reference 1 and journal description, for budget journals. And so using it is not getting it displayed in InfoPort. They are aware of that. And I believe that's part of their next, what is it, 6.7 we're going to be on now, something like that. But it is part of the next upgrade to get that the tables updated so that information, when used, will display in InfoPort. But yes, we're going to put every bit of identifying information we can on the budget journals, and then we'll, hopefully InfoPort will be updated so that it will display there as well.
Okay, I think this is a reference to a previous question because it says, yes, but we want sources that are not on that table. So the download of what is on the table doesn't really help. Can you make a query for that?
So if it's not on the table, that means it's not on the table. I don't understand the question. I mean, if you look for it on the table and the source isn't there, that means it's not associated. It really does both things. What's not there? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you would have, if you're welcome to submit a report request, you have to go through CC Info. You have to fill out the report information request form. That will have to be submitted via a help ticket. That'll go. There's a lot of paperwork that has to happen for that. Your best bet is to download the table. That's going to be your fastest way to go. The likelihood of getting something new for fiscal year end is kind of slim.
All right, here's another question. When associated revenue budgets were originally created, were foundation business unit / departments included?
No, it's just for UNCCH.
Okay, next. We want to get a list of what is not on the table so we can add them without identifying them one at a time. So this is a continued discussion of.
So again, please feel free to submit a report information request form. We can, yeah. Okay. Okay, so one of the things we did want to just point out to you guys is that when you want to see budget period 17, okay, when you're looking at your budgets in InfoPort, remember you're going to have to select FY16 and FY17 in order to, and budget period 17. So there was a document that went out last fall that kind of explains how the budget periods and the fiscal years work. But basically, remember, when you want to see total budget for any given year, you want to select the previous fiscal year and the current fiscal year to see that. Okay?
All right, right now we don't have any more questions in the chat window, but please feel free if you want to type something in. We will read it. So here's something coming in. Will you be sending that info out again? I'm not sure what that info refers to.
Oh, the fiscal, no, we hadn't planned to. But it could be attached to the budget memo that has to go out. And I will leave that in the very capable hands of my friend Henry Price, who is in the room right now.
Writing it down.
Writing it down. Yeah, we can do that. It's a really good suggestion.
That would be great, is the response. All right, any more questions? Just please feel free to type them in the chat window, and we will get to your question ASAP. Okay, here's another question. I think there was a reference field in InfoPort for types of F&A transactions.
No, there's not. So when you go to the Transactions tab in InfoPort, you have reference is one of the, oh gosh, I think it says ref 1. I'd have to look at the screen. But what gets updated in that field varies based on the transaction type. So there's different information there if it's a voucher than if it's a budget journal or than if it's a GL journal. But what we realized relatively recently was that that information is not being updated. They're not pulling it from the tables so that even if it's used, you know, it's not being displayed in InfoPort. But they are aware of that. They know how to fix it. And I believe, I'm not working with the InfoPort team closely, so I don't want to guarantee, but I feel like I remember that that is going to be addressed in the upcoming release.
All right, next question. What is the benefit of not associating a trust budget or purpose of not doing, or what is the purpose of not doing that?
Oh, that is a really good question. So, you know, if you don't want people to be able to basically have spending authority right away, then you might not want to associate something. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm going to give you a budget, and your budget is $50,000 for this year. That is your budget. Doesn't matter whether we make $40,000 this year or whether we get $100,000 in this year. What you have to spend is $50,000. And so I may decide that that source is best to be unassociated so that it's very clear to you how much you want to spend. Because if all of a sudden, you know, $75,000 has come in, it looks like I have all that money to spend, but really your budget's only $50,000. And so it puts a very clear line between what you really should have the authority to spend. Now you guys know that trust funds are what we call track without budget. Okay, so the system is not going to stop a transaction whether there's budget there or not. Okay, but again, it's a management tool. So saying something is associated or not associated is it's how you want to manage those dollars. So if you want to manage them based to a certain dollar amount and that's it, regardless of how much comes in, then you would want your budgets to be unassociated. I hope I explained that okay.
Again, I think this is a continuation of a previous discussion. The trans ID started with FORM for formula. Can we just use the first 4 digits of trans ID to identify type of F&A allocation? Carry forward, formula, permanent.
Yes, that's what, I'm sorry, I wasn't specific enough. FORM is formula allocation. This year we're going to use FACF for F&A carry forward. That I'm aware of, there aren't any plans to use a mask on the permanent. Is that what it is, FARB? Oh, you know what it is? Yeah, I do remember that. FARB is the mask for F&A recurring budget, and there was state, STRB for state, and it was like STRB for revenue recurring, something like that, but they're out there. But yes, they'll continue to be used. The only difference is last year we did not use one for carry forward, and this year we are going to.
So there's another comment that says, so that is an InfoPort as trans ID.
As trans ID. There is also these reference and journal description fields that have been requested be used, and those are the ones that are not picking up an info port right now. But I'm so glad. I don't know who, I bet that was the college.
It was.
Thank you, college, for pointing that out.
Okay, any additional questions? We still have plenty of time to answer any of your questions. Just go ahead and type them into the chat window field, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. We'll take a couple of more minutes here just to see if we have some additional questions for Nicole, Henry, and Robin, who are here with us on this webinar today. I'm checking to see if anyone's typing. I don't see anyone typing in the chat window. So again, we'll give it another minute to see if we have any additional questions. As Nicole mentioned, and she might even mention it again, this recording will be posted on the CC Info website. It'll be on that fiscal year-end page. We try to get it up as quickly as we can. Sometimes it takes a day or two for the recording to process through this vendor that we use for these webinars. So give us a day or two, but we will get it posted on the fiscal year-end page. Okay, I don't see any additional questions, and I don't see anyone typing.
Do you guys have anything that you want to add? So,
come around and say that, Robin.
Okay, hang on just a second.
Robin's coming to share.
When Nicole was talking about us investigating possibly rolling fund up for state parent, we were referring to the control option that we would possibly control at a rolled up fund, but you would still have to budget at a detailed fund and spend at a detailed fund.
So meaning when you enter your departmental state budgets, you still have to say this is 20101. This is academic affairs for instruction. 20110. Academic affairs for research, or whatever the case may be. Okay. So the last thing I want to remind you again, all of this associated budget stuff for trust funds it's very specific about how that chart fill string is entered on the revenue side of the table. Okay, that it's really important. So I want to encourage you to go back out to CC Info and to look for the Associated Budgets webinar that we did last year. I think we did it this past fall, or it's probably been 9 months or so, maybe even a year, but the information in it is still relevant. It has not changed. So go and, if you're brand new to the university, and this feels a little like Greek, go and spend the maybe 45 minutes or so to watch the webinar and to familiarize yourself with how these work. And if you just need a refresher, go and just flip through the screenshots. You might not even really need to watch the webinar so much as just check out the PowerPoint that came with it, okay? But again, that is on CC Info, so I want to encourage you to check that out. Did we get a question?
Yeah, we did get a question. First of all, we have a comment from the college saying roll up for control would be awesome. And then we have a question, will the set options be available for control on budget transfers?
Yes, they will. I just want to remind you that that is a functionality that is open on every budget journal and transfer. So if someone has access to enter a budget journal and transfer, that can be done. It is something that's really only been widely communicated to the MOUs, but should you still need to control further, you can do that using set options. Yeah, and remember, they go budget period by budget period, so you would need to, they don't carry forward, the word of the day, from FY16 to 17. You will need to set those up again for 17. That's a good point, Robin.
I don't see any additional questions, so I think we will wrap it up.
This has been so fun. It feels like old times, y'all. Thank you so much. If you do have any other questions, feel free to let us know. And remember, get those help tickets in by May 20th. Take care, and happy fiscal year ending.